The laugh cut through the lobby before anyone even realized what was happening. It was sharp, loud, the kind of laugh that didn't come from joy but from comfort and power, from someone who had never been told no. Heads turned slowly, like people watching an accident they didn't want to stop. The sound echoed off marble and glass, filling the bright space with something ugly. The sun was high outside, pouring through the tall glass windows that lined the building. The city's wealth reflected back in those windows. Steel, money, status. Inside, the light bounced off white marble floors so clean they almost glowed. It was the kind of place where voices were usually low and confident, where footsteps sounded important. And right there, in the center of it all, everyone could see her. She stood at the reception desk with her back straight and her shoulders relaxed. A black woman in a modest blazer. No diamonds, no designer bag, no assistant standing behind her. Just a plain folder held tightly in both hands like it mattered. Like what was inside it mattered. Her hair was neat, her face calm. She didn't look lost. She didn't look afraid. She looked like someone who knew exactly why she was there. But the laugh came again. The rich kid leaned against one of the marble pillars like he owned it. Early 20s, clean haircut, shoes that probably cost more than someone's rent. Confidence dripping from him like it had been handed down with his last name. He pointed at her openly, not even trying to hide it. "You're in the wrong building," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Cleaning staff enters from the back." The words landed and stayed there, hanging, heavy. The lobby went quiet. Not the calm kind of quiet, the uncomfortable kind. Sunlight spilled across the floor, catching dust in the air. People froze in place. Some looked away immediately, pretending to scroll on their phones. Some stared at the ceiling. Others watched with wide eyes, like they were waiting to see how bad it would get. She opened her mouth to speak. He cut her off without even looking at her face. "Do you even know where you are?" he scoffed, pushing himself off the pillar. "This place isn't for people like you." People felt that sentence more than they heard it. It pressed into the room, into the walls, into the silence. It was the kind of sentence that had been said before, in different ways, in different places, the kind that made people shrink or explode. Security stood a few steps away, unsure. One guard shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The receptionist glanced down at her screen, suddenly very focused on nothing. No one wanted to be responsible for what came next. The woman didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. Her face didn't change. If anything, she seemed almost still, like she had stepped out of the moment while everyone else was trapped in it. "I have an appointment," she said. Her voice was steady, clear, calm. The kid laughed again, louder this time, enjoying it now. Enjoying the way the room leaned into him. "With who?" he said. "The janitor?" A few snickers followed, nervous ones, the kind people use to blend in, to stay safe, to avoid becoming the next target. But if you looked closely, something about her didn't match what was happening. Her eyes weren't wide. They weren't angry. They weren't wet. There was no fear there. No shame. Just patience. Like someone waiting for the right moment to speak, not because they were weak, but because they were sure. Outside, black cars rolled up to the curb. Their windows were dark. Their doors heavy. Important people stepped out, straightening their jackets, adjusting their ties. The city kept moving. The sun kept shining. Everything looked normal. Inside, a mistake was being made. The kid took a step closer to the desk, leaning forward, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel personal. "You should leave before you embarrass yourself," he said. "People like you don't get meetings here." She looked at him then, really looked at him, not with hate, not with pleading, just with a calm that made him pause for half a second, even if he didn't realize why. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she said. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no raised voice. The receptionist finally looked up, eyes flicking between them. "Ma'am," she said softly, unsure, "do you have a name?" The woman gave it. Clear, confident. The receptionist typed it in. Her fingers slowed, her eyebrows pulled together slightly. She glanced at the screen again, then back at the woman. Then at the screen one more time. The kid noticed the change and laughed it off. "Probably fake," he said. "Anyone can say a name." The receptionist swallowed. "One moment," she said, her voice tighter now. Security stepped a little closer, not to the woman, but to the space between them. The guard cleared his throat. "Sir," he said quietly to the kid. "Let's just—" "Relax," the kid snapped. "She doesn't belong here." The woman rested the folder on the desk gently, like it deserved respect. I don't need to belong, she said. I just need to be heard. Her words didn't sound dramatic. They sounded certain. People shifted. Someone near the elevator pressed the button again, even though it had just been pressed. A man in a suit wiped his palms on his pants. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Though no one could explain why, the kid rolled his eyes. This is getting sad, he said. Security, do your job. The guard hesitated again. His eyes flicked to the receptionist, who was now staring at her screen like it might bite her. Sir, the guard said slowly, let's just wait a second. Why? The kid snapped. Because she says so. Because something feels off, the guard thought, but didn't say. The woman stood there, hands resting lightly on the desk now. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't panicking. Time seemed to move differently around her, like she wasn't on the same clock as everyone else in the room. The kid leaned back, folding his arms, confident again. You know what? He said loudly, turning to the small audience that had formed. This is what happens when people mistake confidence for importance. A few people nodded, just to be safe. A few looked down, ashamed. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The elevator dinged. The sound was small, but it cut through everything. The doors opened and a group of executives stepped out. Men and women in tailored suits, serious faces, focused eyes. They moved with purpose, talking quietly among themselves until one of them stopped mid-step. He looked at her. His whole body froze. The conversation behind him died instantly. The other executives followed his gaze. The air shifted, subtle but real, like the temperature had changed. Is there a problem? The executive asked, his voice calm but firm. The kid turned quickly, relief washing over his face. Authority, backup. Yeah, he said, pointing. This woman is causing a scene. She's not supposed to be here. The executive didn't look at the kid, not even for a second. His eyes stayed on her. The woman met his gaze. She gave a small nod. Nothing more. Miss Carter, the executive said, stepping forward. We've been expecting you. The words landed like a quiet explosion. The room didn't react right away. It took a second for the meaning to sink in, for the sound of it to travel from ears to understanding. The kid laughed once, sharp and confused. Wait, what? The executive finally turned to him. His expression was unreadable. This is the lead partner for the acquisition meeting, he said. The one deciding the future of your family's company. Silence rushed back in, thick, heavy, bright with daylight and disbelief. The kid's face drained of color. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked around, searching for someone to laugh with him. No one did. The receptionist's hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. Security stepped back, suddenly very aware of where they stood. The woman picked up her folder. You never asked who I was, she said, her voice still calm. You only decided who I wasn't. No one spoke. Outside, the sun kept shining. Inside, everything had changed. And as she walked toward the elevators with the executives, the rich kid stood frozen in the middle of the lobby, realizing too late that the moment he thought was entertainment had become the beginning of his reckoning. The doors closed behind her. The room exhaled, and somewhere between the marble floors and the glass walls, a lesson settled in, unfinished, waiting to be fully understood. He didn't even lower his voice this time. He waved security over with two sharp flicks of his fingers, the way someone signals waiters at a restaurant they think they own. Get her out, he said, loud and casual. She's disrupting the space. The word space hung there, thick with meaning. Not the room, not the building, the space, as if this place was sacred ground and she had dirtied it just by standing still. The guards looked at each other. One was older, his face lined with years of following rules written by people who never stood where he stood. The other was younger, stiff in his uniform, still learning when to speak and when to stay quiet. Protocol said be polite. Protocol said ask questions. Protocol said don't assume. But protocol didn't sign their paychecks. She's not on any list, the younger guard muttered, glancing at his tablet like it might save him. The rich kid scoffed. Exactly. The woman didn't rush. She didn't argue. She didn't explain herself like she owed anyone clarity. She calmly slid her folder onto the desk, placing it squarely between herself and the receptionist. The sound it made was soft but deliberate. My meeting was confirmed, she said. Noon. The kid stepped closer. Too close. Close enough that his shadow brushed her shoulder, even though the sun was high and bright behind him. He lowered his voice now, turning it sharp and private, like a blade meant just for her. You don't belong here, he said. Know your place. That sentence wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was designed to shrink someone, to make them fold in on themselves, to remind them of all the doors that had been closed before. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, flooding the lobby with light. Every face was lit up, every reaction visible. There were no shadows to hide in, just choices, who to be, who to protect, who to sacrifice for comfort. People began to whisper. Quietly at first. Then not so quietly. She should just leave. Why cause trouble? She's embarrassing herself. Each word floated through the air like permission slips. Permission to look away. Permission to blame her instead of the cruelty unfolding in front of them. But she stayed. Not because she was stubborn, not because she didn't understand danger. She stayed because she had learned long ago what happens when you shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You disappear, and once you disappear, people decide you were never there at all. Her shoulders stayed square, her chin stayed level, her hands rested lightly on the desk, palms down, grounding herself. She felt the stares, felt the weight of them pressing in from every direction. She felt the old memories rise up too, being questioned, being doubted, being told to wait, to step aside, to be patient while someone else decided her worth. The rich kid noticed the attention, the whispers, the tension, and he loved it. He smirked, turning slightly so he could address the room like an audience. "You see," he said, spreading his hands. "This is what happens when people think confidence equals importance." A few people nodded. A few laughed softly. Most stayed silent. The words stung anyway. They were meant to. They were meant to remind everyone watching that power belonged to people like him. That confidence without permission was a crime. The room felt smaller, the ceiling lower, the air tighter. Security stepped closer now, not aggressively, but enough to send a message. The older guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "Please." That one word carried 1,000 meanings. "Please don't make this harder. Please don't make me choose. Please don't make me do something I'll regret." She took a breath, slow, controlled. The kind of breath you take when you're steadying yourself, not when you're afraid. When she spoke, her voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It didn't beg. "I'm not here to beg," she said. "I'm here to decide." The words cut through the noise like a clean line. The kid blinked. Just once. It wasn't much, but it was the first crack. Decide what? He laughed, trying to pull the moment back into his control. Before she could answer, the elevator dinged. The sound was sharp, clear, final. All heads turned. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a group of executives stepping out into the lobby. Suits pressed sharp, shoes polished, faces serious. They moved with urgency, mid-conversation, words about numbers and timelines floating briefly through the air before dying as they noticed the scene in front of them. The rich kid straightened immediately. His posture shifted, his shoulders rolled back, his chin lifted. This was his world again. Authority, familiarity, people who knew his last name. He stepped forward, ready to explain, ready to reclaim the narrative. "There's been a misunderstanding," he began, his voice smooth again. But he didn't notice it at first. He didn't notice the way one executive stopped walking. Didn't notice the sudden stillness. Didn't notice the way conversation behind him fell apart mid-sentence. That executive's eyes were locked on the woman at the desk, not scanning, not confused, focused. The tension in the room shifted, subtle but unmistakable, like the air had changed pressure. "Is there a problem?" the executive asked. The rich kid jumped at the chance. He turned quickly, gesturing toward her. "Yes," he said. "This woman is refusing to leave. She's not authorized to be here." The executive didn't look at him. Not even for a second. His eyes stayed on her. She met his gaze calmly. No relief, no triumph, just acknowledgement. "Miss Carter," the executive said, stepping forward, "we've been expecting you." The room froze. The words didn't explode. They didn't echo. They sank, slowly, deeply, like a weight dropping into still water. The rich kid laughed once, sharp and confused. "Wait, what?" The executive turned then, finally, his face hardening. "This is the lead partner for the acquisition meeting," he said evenly. "The one scheduled for noon." Silence swallowed the lobby. The kid's smile collapsed. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked around, searching for confirmation that this was a joke, that someone would laugh with him. No one did. The receptionist's fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. The younger guard stepped back instinctively, suddenly aware that he had almost removed the wrong person. The older guard stared at the floor, jaw tight. The woman picked up her folder slowly. "You never asked who I was," she said, her voice calm, steady, impossible to interrupt. "You only decided who I wasn't. No one spoke. The sunlight still poured in, bright, unforgiving, exposing everything." The executive gestured toward the elevator. "Shall we?" he asked her. She nodded once and stepped forward, passing the rich kid without looking at him. Her presence felt heavier now, not louder. Heavier, like the truth moving through the room. As the executives followed her into the elevator, the rich kid stood frozen in the middle of the lobby. The space he thought he owned no longer recognized him. The doors slid shut. The ding sounded again, and in that moment, standing alone under the bright lights, he realized the laughter had stopped because the power had moved. The executive walked forward slowly, not rushed, not unsure, but deliberate, as if every step carried meaning. His shoes struck the marble floor with a soft echo that somehow sounded louder than the rich kid's laughter ever had. The echo traveled through the lobby, bouncing off glass and stone, cutting through the tension that had wrapped itself around every person in the room. "Is there a problem?" he asked. His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that doesn't need to raise itself to be heard, the kind that already assumes authority. The rich kid answered immediately, words spilling out fast, sharp, practiced. "Yes," he said, pointing without hesitation. "This woman is trespassing. We were just removing her." He said it with confidence, like this was routine, like this was something he had done before and gotten away with every time. His chest lifted as he spoke, his shoulders squared, already expecting agreement, already expecting the world to fall back into place. But the executive didn't look at him, not once. His eyes stayed locked on the woman at the desk, steady, focused, searching, but not doubting. The kind of look reserved for someone whose presence matters. "Ms. Carter," the executive said softly, almost warmly. "We've been waiting." The words fell into the lobby and everything stopped. The air froze. The whispers died mid-breath. Even the hum of the building seemed to quiet itself, like the walls were listening now. Bright silence filled the room, deafening in its stillness. The woman nodded once, just once, no smile, no relief, no surprise. "Seems I arrived early," she said. Her voice carried easily, calm, certain, as if this moment had always been inevitable. The rich kid laughed, but it came out wrong. Short, thin. "Wait, what?" His eyes darted from the executive to the woman and back again, trying to piece together a reality that no longer fit his version of the world. The executive turned then, slowly, fully. His calm shifted just slightly into something harder, sharper. "You're speaking to the lead partner of the firm acquiring your family's company," he said. The sentence landed like glass shattering. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. Sunlight reflected off the marble floor, bouncing up into faces that had gone pale, eyes that had widened, mouths that had fallen open. The truth settled into the room, heavy and undeniable. This woman, the one mocked, the one dismissed, the one security was about to escort out, she controlled the deal that would decide everything: layoffs, leadership, survival. The rich kid's face drained of color so fast it was almost frightening. His confident stance crumbled, his shoulders slumped, his mouth opened, then closed, as if his body no longer trusted his voice. "That's not possible," he said finally, but it sounded weak, childlike, like someone arguing with gravity. She turned to him then, really turned. Her eyes met his for the first time. Calm, measured, not angry, not satisfied, just clear. "You never asked who I was," she said. "You only decided who I wasn't." Each word pressed into him, stripping away the armor he didn't even know he wore. The armor of assumption, of entitlement, of believing the world was built to explain itself to him. The executives behind her straightened, their posture shifting subtly, instinctively. They had seen this kind of moment before, a recalibration, power moving without warning. Security stepped back, suddenly very aware that they had been standing on the wrong side of history just seconds ago. The room had changed hands, cleanly, quietly. The rich kid swallowed hard. His voice dropped, barely audible now. I didn't know." She closed her folder with a soft, final sound. "That was the problem," she said. No one laughed, no one whispered, no one looked away. In the brightest room in the building, his privilege collapsed under the weight of a single assumption. All the things that had always protected him failed at once. His name, his money, his certainty that he belonged wherever he stood. And for the first time in his life, silence didn't protect him. It exposed him. He stood there, surrounded by light, by people, by proof of his own mistake, and there was nowhere to hide. Not behind jokes, not behind authority, not behind the comfort of being believed by default. The executive gestured gently toward the elevator. "Shall we?" he asked her. She nodded again and stepped forward. The sound of her heels against the marble was steady, unhurried. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because she carried anger, but because the room now carried truth. As she passed the rich kid, he turned slightly, as if to say something, an apology, an explanation, a plea, but nothing came out. Words, for once, had abandoned him. The elevator doors slid open. Cool air rushed out. The executives followed her inside one by one, their faces composed, their movements respectful. The woman stepped in last, turning briefly to look back at the lobby. Her eyes didn't search for him. They didn't linger on the faces that had watched her be humiliated. They didn't ask for acknowledgement. They simply held the moment. Then the doors closed. The soft ding echoed through the lobby, and just like that, the center of gravity was gone. The rich kid stood alone now, the space around him suddenly too big, too bright, too honest. The lobby that had once felt like his playground now felt like a courtroom after the verdict. People avoided his gaze. Some stared openly. Others looked down, pretending not to see the wreckage of certainty unfolding in front of them. He felt smaller than he ever had, smaller than the woman he had tried to erase with a sentence, smaller than the guards he had ordered around, smaller than the silence that wrapped around him now. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time felt strange, stretched thin. The receptionist finally exhaled, her hands shaking slightly as she returned to her screen. Security retreated to their posts, eyes forward, faces tight. Life in the building resumed, but the moment did not leave. It clung. The rich kid rubbed his palms together, realizing they were damp. His heart raced. His thoughts spiraled. How had this happened? How had he misread the room so badly? How had he been so sure? Because he always had been. Because no one had ever corrected him before. Because the world had taught him that confidence was enough. Outside, the sun still shone. Cars still pulled up. Deals were still being made. But inside him, something had cracked that couldn't be patched over with money or excuses. He replayed the moment over and over. Her calm, her stillness, her words. "You never asked who I was." He had never needed to ask before. That realization sat heavy in his chest, unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Up above, the elevator climbed, carrying decisions that would ripple through lives, families, futures. Decisions now guided by the woman he had tried to dismiss as nothing. And down below, in the bright lobby where everything had gone wrong, the rich kid stood in the aftermath of his own assumptions, finally understanding that power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it waits, and sometimes it arrives early. The meeting still happened. Sunlight still filled the boardroom, but the air was different now. Heavier, quieter, honest in a way it hadn't been before. The boardroom sat high above the city, wrapped in glass on all sides. Daylight poured in without apology, washing over polished wood, leather chairs, and faces that had spent lifetimes believing they were untouchable. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that futures were being weighed inside this bright room. Deals had been made here before, ruthless ones, quiet ones. But this meeting carried a different pulse. She sat near the center of the table, posture calm, hands folded loosely in front of her. The folder lay open now, pages neatly aligned, no rush, no nerves, just presence. When she spoke, the room listened. Not because she demanded it, because authority doesn't need to ask for permission. Her voice was clear, measured, steady. She spoke numbers without drama, vision without arrogance, conditions without threat. Every sentence landed with purpose. She didn't raise her tone, didn't perform confidence. She simply explained what would happen next and why. Executives nodded. Pens moved. Screens changed. The conversation flowed around her like water around stone, guided by her calm certainty. She spoke of sustainability, of leadership responsibility, of long-term impact, words that sounded ordinary until you realized how rarely they were spoken with sincerity in rooms like this. At the far end of the table, the rich kid sat quietly, smaller than before, not physically but visibly diminished. His back was stiff, his hands folded tight in his lap. No jokes now, no smirks, no leaning back like he owned the space. He stared down at the table more than he looked up. When he did glance at her, it was quick, uncertain, like a child unsure whether he was allowed to speak. This was still his world. The building, the company, the legacy. But for the first time it didn't bend to him. As the meeting moved forward, he listened, really listened. He heard her speak about people he had never considered. Workers, families, communities. He heard her talk about accountability, about how power leaves a mark whether it means to or not, and with every word something shifted inside him. Slowly, uncomfortably, when questions were asked, she answered them directly. No defensiveness, no show. When someone challenged a point, she didn't bristle. She explained again, calmly, as if patience was part of her strategy. The room responded in kind. Tension eased, trust built. The sunlight kept moving across the table, marking time. At the end, she closed her folder gently and stood. The movement was simple, but it commanded attention. Chairs stopped shifting. Screens went dark. Our decision will reflect the values we expect from leadership, she said. That was it. No lecture, no threats, just truth. Her eyes moved briefly down the table and met his. There was no anger there, no satisfaction, just truth, clear and steady. A mirror he wasn't ready for but couldn't look away from. The meeting adjourned quietly. Executives rose, murmuring among themselves, already recalculating futures. The woman gathered her things with the same calm she had carried all day. No one rushed her. No one interrupted. As people filtered out, the rich kid stayed seated for a moment, staring at the empty space where her voice still seemed to linger. He felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest, not fear, not rage, something closer to understanding, or the beginning of it. Later, the lobby looked the same as it always had, bright, polished, impressive. Sunlight spilled through the glass, painting long lines across the floor. People moved in and out, their footsteps echoing softly. She walked toward the exit, her pace unhurried. Behind her, he hesitated, then followed. "Miss Carter," he said quietly. She stopped, but didn't turn right away. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was low, stripped of confidence. "I judged you." The words sounded small in the wide lobby. She turned slowly and faced him. Her expression was calm but not soft. "Honest. You didn't judge me," she said. "You revealed yourself." The sentence landed gently, but it carried weight. Not as punishment, as clarity. Sunlight framed her as she stood there, catching the edges of her hair and shoulders, giving her a quiet glow that had nothing to do with spectacle and everything to do with presence. "Power doesn't announce itself," she continued. "It listens, it observes, and it remembers." He swallowed. Nodded once. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound hollow. She turned and walked toward the doors. They opened automatically, as if recognizing her authority without instruction. She stepped outside into the light. The doors closed behind her. Inside, the lobby returned to its usual rhythm. Phones buzzed, conversations resumed. But something had been left behind. Not tension, not embarrassment, a lesson. The rich kid stood alone for a moment, staring at the closed doors. He felt exposed, not by her words, but by his own. He replayed the day in his mind. The laugh, the pointing, the assumption. He saw it now, clearly. How easily he had decided who belonged and who didn't. How little he had questioned at power. No one had ever corrected him before. Outside, the woman paused briefly on the steps. The city stretched out in front of her, loud and alive. She took a breath, not of relief, of resolve. She had learned long ago that moments like this didn't change the world overnight, but they cracked something open. And cracks let light in. She walked on. Back inside, the building stood tall, unchanged, but the people inside it were not. In a world obsessed with appearances, the loudest mistake is assuming worth by sight alone. Because dignity doesn't need permission, and respect, once denied, is rarely returned. Never measure a person by the space they occupy, because the quietest person in the room may be deciding your future.